feel like we're
As you
just
could,
getting started.
This is part
Okay.
one.
this is to be continued.
There's some part of film language that is not intellectual and is something that is intuitive and felt. I'd been making my own films and high 8 and whatnot, 16 millimeter. But having access to this new computer editing thing was something I was really excited about. It's a hard thing to explain to someone because there's so much intuition. If you're really getting into the guts of it, it's all about feeling. It's very musical, you know. It's about rhythm, it's about emotion. You either have it or you don't. And get the technology to the point where it's a frictionless experience and you're just working the machine at a nice rhythm. Then you're working as fast as you can draw. From just a pure creativity standpoint, there's just nothing like working in a nonlinear digital environment. I mean, I can make things come to life within moments that just would have taken days cutting in film.
Tyler, thank you so much for joining us on Ambitchiously Intelligent. I want to introduce you. You are experimental filmmaker, director, producer, and editor. And your journey we are so excited to dive in that we were like, what can we ask him? We're going to ask him everything. But we can't. So what I want to start with is that you described your career as accidental. And it was very interesting you said that. And then I was like, wait, if you look back, do you think there's like a pattern or philosophy that guided your choices?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think accidentally on purpose might be what I did. Yeah, I mean, when I was getting out of art school in San Francisco in the mid 90s, I was married to a German woman, and I was pretty much convinced I was going to move to Berlin and become a video artist. And there were different external forces that were making that the legal status of our marriage was being sort of challenged by new rules and whatnot. And I actually left San Francisco to take a job in Los Angeles as a dialogue editor, and she stayed behind to finish school, and the relationship dissolved, within a few months. Anyway, now I'm in Los Angeles and I'm working as a sound editor. And I'm in a whole new city, and a city that I thought I would only be visiting temporarily to pick up some job skills. I thought, oh, if I could just go down and work on this new thing called Avid, I could pick up some job skills that would, keep me employed somewhere, anywhere in the world, really. So I started working as a sound editor. I knew some friends who asked me to come down and work, and I was working the night shift and learning all these cool skills. And then I was asked to be a picture assistant on another low budget feature film. I should mention that the feature film I was doing dialogue editing on was called Pterodactyl Woman from Beverly Hills.
A what? do say
That, that's
what?
that is the appropriate response. What?
But tell us about the film.
Oh, this movie,
give it a name, please.
Pterodactyl Woman from Beverly Hills. It was it was a film by a director named Philippe Mora, who'd done a bunch of stuff, and it had Beverly D'Angelo and Moon Unit Zappa. So this was my first job in Hollywood, was doing dialogue editing for this film. And I had some friends who were sort of laughing about it, but having just come from the San Francisco Art Institute, where I'd been studying with George Kuchar, it didn't seem like that much of a stretch to work on a film called Pterodactyl Woman from Beverly Hills. The last film I'd made with George Kuchar was about Avon sales representatives in the Amazon jungle who encounter a secret Nazi lab where they're making zombies. So, there was like
Seems fitting.
between the fine art world and the commercial film world, there wasn't really much delineation at that point.
Makes sense.
No, so then that job just led to another job of picture assisting, and I was learning the Avid, and I was a picture assistant on another film with my same friend who was editing, and then I just started picking up freelance editing jobs, and then it just started growing from there, and I was making money. I'd never really made that kind of money. I'd been a film projectionist or, like an independent art house cinema manager, or I had, driven a recycling truck. But this was like the
Mm.
first time I had a real, like a real job with like a real, uh, real fee.
Mm.
So I was really happy, like making money in this time. And it was like this is the mid 90s. So we're working on those beige box Macintosh computers. And
Good
oftentimes
stuff.
we had to turn them on their sides and put fans on them to keep them cool because they were overheating. And so there was a lot of yeah, a lot of early tech, right? This was like no internet, and we were still using big 3/4 inch tapes. Oh, excuse me, I need a drink of water. Still using like big 3/4 inch videotapes, and it was just that was the technology of the day. But looking back on it, it's extremely clunky.
Yeah.
So that's what began that. And I was really excited to do that because I'd been making my own films and high eight and whatnot, 16 millimeter. But having access to this new computer editing thing was something I was really excited about. Being in San Francisco, I'd either, I could have access to this like old school videotape editing, which I really did not like.
Mm.
And and I learned editing on film, and I really liked the way that you could really work in this nonlinear way, that you could just hang your strips of film on the wall and then rearrange them in any way. Very difficult to do that with videotape. You can't really cut videotape. You have to just record over it and on top, just like it's a
Mm.
recording process, not a really like a cutting process. So I was really excited to get into computerized digital editing. And, then a few years go by and I've built relationships with certain companies that I've worked at, and I sort of have keys to different places around town. And I've bought my own hard drives. And that point, I remember buying a 3 GB Avid hard drive, big
Oh.
box, huge thing. And it was like $700. And I had to buy this 3 GB hard drive because back then, everything working with the Avid computers was sort of proprietary. Like you had to use their drives that have their connections, and you couldn't just plug in off-the-shelf hard drives. That changed later, but it was still a very closed system and very expensive. And so I had my own hard drives, and I could plug in after work, and I was working on my own films and making my own films, but this time using Avid. So that was a big part of it. I was sort of like funding my experimental film career with working in the independent film business by day.
Mm. Wow.
So yeah, a little bit accidental, but a little bit on purpose.
Okay. Wow. I've been always fascinated with editing on film. I feel like it's a magical process that you're kind of like physically in charge of those things. Can you tell us a little bit more how, like, you obviously experienced it all from, you said like Super 8, you edited on film, you edited videotapes. Now you're experiencing the new wave of digital editing, and like with Avid, the Ventures off, obviously, like all those new technologies. How did this experience shaped you, and what changed? Like, what can you tell us? What's the difference between digital and on film in terms of your own perception of this process?
Well, digital is much, much, much better.
Okay.
I mean, just because what it's done is it's created this sort of frictionless experience of that you can sort of work at the speed of thought a little bit. And that's what's so nice about it. Working in film, if you had a thought that you wanted to cut a certain shot in, you had to mark the film and stop the machine and get up and go to the shelf and then open the binder and look through the pages and find the serial number of the roll of film, then go to the shelf and find the box with the serial number of the roll of film, and then pull the box down and pull the spool out and put the spool on and then wind up to the numbers. I mean, it was like, you know, 20 minutes to find a shot,
Hmm.
maybe. Unless you had assistant editors, like the big editing rooms had lots of assistant editors, and things were all kind of that was the whole point. It was sort of like you had all these people with extra hands handing you things. Can I get shot 121? And they hand it to you within a moment. But if you're working by yourself, it's a laborious, tedious process. And then, of course, every frame that you'd cut out of the film, you had to save and restore back to the roll it was cut out of because you don't want to throw a frame away. So there's just the bookkeeping. I mean, you work slowly, and some people like the working slowly. It makes you think more about your cuts, and there's something to that.
Hmm.
Sort of that measure twice, cut once adage. Like, do I really want to cut here? Because if I cut into this shot, it's going to take me half an hour to put the one shot in there. Uh, so it does make you really consider what you're doing, but from just a pure creativity standpoint, there's just nothing like working in a nonlinear digital environment. I mean, I can make things come to life within moments that
Mm.
just would have taken days cutting in
Hmm.
film. I mean, it was like we cut in film because that's what we had, right? So you just use the technology you have. You don't think like, oh, if only I had this other thing that was way better. It was at that time, this whole idea of electronic editing was really experimental and far out. I mean, there were some people building, I think like George Lucas had built a system that used all like laser discs. They transferred everything to laser discs, and you had a wall of laser disc players. You could just sort of call up shots. I mean, these were like, or this was like in the late 80s or something. There were these ideas. They were trying to get this random access. I mean, all these people who were editors were trying to find a way to improve this process of
Mm.
getting away from film. Like, why can't I just call up the shot with a press of a button?
Hmm.
Right? That was like, oh, if only we could do that. So,
Can.
so yeah, I mean, and now, nonlinear digital editing has been has been the standard for 30 years. I've been doing this for 30 years.
Why do you
So,
think some people
so I mean, there's a
still?
there's a romanticism around like cutting on film.
Yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
yes.
Uh, and I've known some people who wanted to do it, just for that tactile romantic feeling. But part of the problem is like some of the supplies are hard to source now.
Hmm.
Like just getting the cores to wrap the film around, or where do you get the splicing tape, or parts for the flatbed editors? It's like people are giving these machines away that were hundreds of thousands of dollars because some parts of them can no longer be repaired.
Hmm.
Mm.
You know what I mean? So like there's just a practical reason for why you can't really go back and do that because just the machinery and the technology is just not really supported,
Okay.
So it's fine. You're not really missing anything. You think you are, but after like 2 days cutting film, you'd be like, get me out of here.
You're like, no,
Yeah.
romantic, my ass.
Hmm.
Like,
Maybe like a
no,
super short film, like 2 minutes.
Yeah, it's like 30 seconds.
30 seconds.
Yes.
I'll do that. But
Yeah, maybe.
so
Yeah,
with
but I mean, it's just that thing. It's just like you work with the technology that you have that's available to you.
Hmm.
So, when listening to you now, you're saying obviously that it's way better and easier and more fun to work today, like the editing. And I assume it has also changed your experimental filmmaking. Like, how do you now approach it? Has anything changed there, or was it always the same?
Well, yeah, I mean, in the editorial process, now I can work like I'm working in a sketchbook. I can
Okay.
try something. Oh, that doesn't work. Oh, just move it over here. Oh, that doesn't work. Oh, move it over here. Oh, that's better. Okay, try something else. Let's make a copy of that and do another version. I can just work like I'm turning pages in a sketchbook.
Mm.
And I just find that just I can get into a creative flow really nicely like that. Again, it's like when everything's working correctly, it's almost a kind of frictionless experience. I have enough muscle memory on the keyboard that I can just drive this thing, and it's very responsive. Uh, Not so. working in the old analog ways. Everything had to be much more premeditated. And the other thing is too, is every time you cut the film, I mean, I would, we would work in a copy. We wouldn't cut the negative or cut the original. We'd make a copy of the film and edit that. But every time you make a splice and you tape it and splice it again and tape it and splice it again, and then you change it and change it, the thing just becomes very raggedy.
Mm.
And it's sort of hard to evaluate how it's really flowing when it's just sort of blopping all over the place, So again, that's why I think we were a little bit more cautious about where we would cut. And so like, again, like I think with digital, I can just be not cautious. It's just like it's really easy to try something. It's really
Mhm.
easy to just keep trying something. Let's try something that doesn't work at all. Let's just try this crazy idea, which you can try in a moment or two. And if you were doing that on film, it would be days. And then if you had to undo it and restore it, you have to put every single thing back into that copy of the film, which is also a laborious task. So again, like every frame you cut out, you got to save that and put it somewhere where you can find it again in case you have to put it back.
Wow.
So, I mean, just the computer as a tool for doing that is perfect.
Mm.
It's just a very high performing um, dynamic database. And
Right.
it's just I don't know, it's great. It's a great tool. And I'm teaching editing now, and I'm seeing how all these younger students just come up knowing how to do it.
Mm.
And a lot of these kids are self-taught, they're using Resolve or Premiere or even CapCut or iMovie on their phone and just this idea of editing video is now as common as sending a text message.
Yeah, this is very true with social media and everything. It seems like younger generations, they just get a grip of, like, they understand how it works. They maybe cannot explain it,
Hmm.
but they know, um, what, like, the juxtaposition of two pictures, how it looks and how it should be edited, and what looks good and what feels, natural and everything. They just
Yeah, it's a
get a
language. I mean,
natural hold of it. Yeah.
yeah, there's a kind of visual language there, and they're just coming up with it somewhat intuitively.
Hmm.
And some people are better at it than others, just like some people are better writers or better musicians.
Mm.
Um, you know,
Mm.
but um, but it's really interesting to see how it's just become sort of part of the popular culture making. That everybody can do some amount of video editing.
Mm.
Very true.
Whereas it was really this strange esoteric process for a long time, like in little dark rooms.
Yeah.
So it's good that I think it's more appreciated now. I'm seeing that also with younger generations. Like they're really appreciating what that editorial process means
Mm.
because they're doing it. So they understand like, oh, it's really difficult to execute a sequence like that, or this is really like, they're in some ways more interested in it now because they have more experience with it. So they have something of an understanding of what this process is. And even I worked with producers who barely knew what film editing was or how it worked. They're just like, I don't know, you just go in the room and make it better.
You just do it.
Do your magic.
Do your
Yeah, there was
magic.
sort of
Right.
that. And I was never elitist enough to think that I was like some special magician. For me, it was frustrating that more people were not sort of appreciative of how the process functions.
Mm.
And
Mm.
occasionally if I'd run into that with a director who didn't really understand the process, like they'd never edited anything of their own, so they didn't really understand the process. And it's a hard thing to explain to someone because there's so much intuition and feeling. I mean, sure, there's all this technical stuff that you need to learn, but if you're really getting into the guts of it, it's all about feeling. It's
Yeah.
very musical. It's about rhythm, it's about emotion, it's all this feeling stuff that's you either have it or you don't. And so that's kind of what I mean about like if you can get the technology to the point where it's a frictionless experience and you're just working the machine at a nice rhythm, then you're working as fast as you can draw or
Mm.
compose music or something like that. So It's really nice. I mean, I think it's unlocked a lot of creativity, having digital editing.
Mm.
And it's less of a factory product. I mean, you really could go back and look at like editing rooms in the 1930s, and they look like sweatshops
Mm.
filled with people, mostly women, of course, too, right? Just like
True.
cutting away because it was back then it was considered, women's work. It was like you're working like you're stitching or sewing or something. So that, which is a really strange gendering of that process. But
Mm.
I think
So
even my German ex was saying like, "Why do you want to be an editor? That's a woman's job." Back in the 90s, in the
Back
90s.
in the
Okay, so
90s,
yeah.
I know.
wow.
And I was struck by that. I was like, wow, I guess the old world really is old.
Yeah.
Some
So
habits
much
die
has
hard.
changed.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
May I ask you about your the film that you started yourself, launched your career pretty much? It was the documentary about American musician Daniel Johnston. And was
Hmm.
that also shot on film, or you were the editor of that film?
I was.
Yes. Tell us
Uh,
about this.
yes, it was shot on film. I had I'll just jump back a little bit before that. I had done one feature-length documentary that I edited and sort of co-wrote and co-produced about Death Row Records. Very
Hmm.
low budget film, but I knew the producer of the Daniel Johnston movie, Henry Rosenthal, and he mentioned that the director of this new movie he was making on Daniel Johnston moved to my street in Hollywood. And I said, don't hire anyone else. So I went over and met with Jeff Fiersig, the director, and we hit it off. And that began this 2-year process of editing this film. It was the longest edit that I've ever done. But it was we got to try a lot of different techniques and styles and just inventive ways of storytelling.
Mm.
It was sort of the sky's the limit. Like let's just go for it. Let's just try everything. And yes, it was shot on film. It was shot on Super 16. And there were some video elements that we had that were archival, but most of it was film. And it was edited on Final Cut Pro in 2000 from 2000 wait 2003 or 2003 and 2004, both those years.
Okay. And you said that it launched your career. So what was
Mm.
then the difference afterwards? Like was it
Well,
just your phone was didn't stop ringing or like what was it?
sort of, yeah. I mean, that film ended up going to Sundance and
Nice.
it won a prize for Best Director for Jeff.
Hmm.
And a lot of people saw it and a lot of people liked it. And we were doing a lot of things in that movie that just people had not done in a documentary. We were mixing things like first person POV recreations. Like the recreations were shot from the point of view of Daniel as he was experiencing things. Let's see, we did elaborate sort of practical in-camera effects using mechanics to move things in front of the cameras. We were photographing a lot of like the tabletop objects as we were
Hmm.
photographing a lot of the small objects. Sometimes we were doing these camera moves. Other times we had a combination of like high resolution photography and digital animation cooked into the high resolution photography. There's one shot in that film that's a complete uh, 3D CG render of there's one shot. It's a completely made up, 3D CG shot. And there were other things that were very handheld and just like there was a lot of fun and attention to detail and different storytelling techniques, like using Super 8 film or using like the sound of a motor drive on an old 35 millimeter camera to whip through photos, or just we were just getting really creative with the
Mm.
visual, all the different visual presentations and all the different ways that you could tell a story visually. And I think a lot of people saw that and noticed it. And yes, and I basically have worked constantly since then.
Yeah, constantly since then. Um, well, when we jump to now, like something that I really want to talk to you about, and that is Shangri-La, and it's about Rick Rubin,
Hmm.
the series. Um, I am a fan of Rick Rubin's, I have to admit. I am very, very impressed with him as a human being. Music, yes, the musicians that he works with, but him as a human being and his philosophy and everything. How was it working with him? Because he is used to being in control of the creative process. And when you're making a film about somebody, you kind of, it's more than the others are doing it. But like, how was that working with him or even meeting him?
I mean, I only met him twice, and I came onto that project as sort of the finishing editor. Not necessarily the finishing editor, because two of the other editors stayed on, but there was one editor who left, and then I was brought in to sort of replace him, and I was sort of also the fresh editor.
Mm.
They'd been working on this show for a year, if not more. So they were really deep in, and I think they were just ready for it to be done. And there were some creative differences with Rick along the ways. And I think our team ended up sort of winning most of those battles.
Mm.
Our team was more invested in a multi-layered and elaborate visual presentation. And back then I think he was more interested in just presenting straight interviews between him and the subjects. And some of those interviews were great, but had we just stayed with that, it would have limited how many artists could be in the episodes. There were only four
Mm.
episodes.
Okay.
So the idea was let's just sort of weave everybody together. We'll drop in a little bit, a few choice words with this artist and maybe some music, and a few choice words with this artist and maybe some music, and just keep it kind of moving and flowing together. And I think he was just more interested in like a podcast format. He just wanted
Mm.
long form conversations. And there were some conversations with him about, yeah, that's not exciting television necessarily. So,
Mhm.
so what we did ended up prevailing. I think he was happy with it in the end, for sure. Um, but yeah, it was interesting, getting to meet him. And I went out twice. I drove out to Malibu. I think the first time he just wanted to know who I was, and because I was the new editor coming in, and I think that there was just some concern that we weren't really investigating the full potential of the footage. And I also went out there and played a lot of footage for him too. Like we are, look at here it is, and we are going through it. And I think after that, he's like, oh yeah, 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 it's fine. So there was a bit of that,
Mm-hmm.
a little bit of just kind of finding that balance of, what did our side want and what did he want, and just getting it to work. And a lot of people seem to really like that show. It was different from most of the stuff that I put together in that there was no defined structure at all, right? It's a free associative meditation on creativity.
Wow.
We could start anywhere and go anywhere. Now the episodes were somewhat themed, so
Mm-hmm.
that helped us guide what was going into what episodes. But there were three of us editors working simultaneously and passing the episodes back and forth and moving things from episode two to episode three. Or let's grab that thing from episode three, and that should be in the last part of episode one. And, so we were rebalancing the episodes constantly, trying to sort of find what really made the most sense as a kind of creative flow. So there's a lot of freedom in that, but it's also like when there's no boundaries, how do you know when you're done, right? It's sort of like
How do you
it's like
know?
we could remake this thing 100 times over. So I think it was just it's both, like sometimes limitations are really helpful.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and and I think everybody working on that show at that time was very skilled and really good at what they did. So we were able to kind of do that because attempting a show like that, everyone's got to be really good at what they do.
Yeah.
Or
And
it doesn't work
also,
very well.
no, and also what you said before is that editing is so intuitive. And here you're three human beings, I mean editors, and you are like handing it back and forth. Like how, like what is that then just the pure trust, or what exactly happens there? Because that
Well, I mean,
sounds
like
very
we
interesting.
would certainly, I mean, we would get together in the mornings and we would review things and we would meet and we would have a discussion. I think we
Hmm.
should do this here. But what if we move that? So we'd make a bit of a game plan every
Okay.
morning
Hmm.
and then sort of divide up and go to work. And then the next day or 2 days later, we review the work and see, oh, okay, that didn't work as well as we thought. What if we switch the order of those two scenes? And, so there's a lot of like, what if we do this? What if we try this? What if this goes there? So it was that kind of a process. And so, we all worked really well together
Nice.
and sort of embraced the chaos of that because
Mm.
it can be a really chaotic process, like working that way. I mean, editing can be chaotic in general, and it's really nice to have sometimes a narrative spine. Like if you have a story that you're telling that has a beginning, a middle, and an end, you can kind of figure out where you are and where things need to go. But if you don't have that at all, you just have to kind of, plant your flag and stick to it. Like this is gonna go here. Let's open with this, and or sometimes there's like a little bit like, well, we know we have to have this in episode one, and we know that this has to go later, and so we would generally kind of understand some of the structural things, and then there were just a bunch of pieces that were completely free to go anywhere.
Mm.
Okay.
So it was sort of balancing those. Like we knew, okay, in the first episode, we need to establish what this place is. So that's
Hmm.
going to be a big chunk of episode one. And sort of setting the tone for what this show is. That's episode one. Like what are we really getting into? And then the subsequent episodes then would sort of, so there was a little bit of a chronology of following Rick's career trajectory. So
Hmm.
we kind of adhered to that as one narrative thread that went all the way from beginning to end. But then which musicians were in which episodes was up for grabs.
Mm. And how then going forward, would you say that you prefer working in a team of multiple editors, or would you rather have a sole control of the project? Or do you think like different projects kind of deserve different approach?
It's different projects have different approaches. I like both. I like working in a team. I mean, I like that it takes the pressure off,
Mm.
that I'm not the sole. Well, especially in a television environment, it's really important because there's a lot of material you've got to get through, and if you're doing multiple episodes, it's almost too much for one person
Mm.
to do. It's really helpful having a team. I think the first television show I did with one other editor, and we just sort of divided up the episodes, we divided up the characters, and then we cut the individual character arcs for the individual characters, and then we got together again and then figured out how to thread which characters into which episodes.
Mm.
And then at that point, we were handing the episodes back and forth, depending on who's working on what. Like you take episode five, I'll take episode six, and then, and then tomorrow we'll switch or something like that. It was very common. Like we rework each other's work. I've done that a lot with other editors working on teams. It's just like I'll rework your stuff, you rework my stuff, and then let's see, because we all have different ways of seeing and feeling things. And
Mm.
sometimes someone will pull something, it will just adjust a cut I've done or add a shot that I hadn't thought of, and it's better, and vice versa. So I like that. But I also do like there is something nice when it's beginning to end, it's been my work all the way through. That
Mm.
can be nice too. That's easier on a feature film. It's very difficult to do on any kind of episodic.
Mm.
I mean, I worked on 3 seasons of Unsolved Mysteries for Netflix, and even though we were assigned our episodes as editors, there were times when I would do a little bit of work on someone else's episode because they were tied up doing something else, or someone, added some shots to my episode because I was busy, or maybe I'd finished my contract and they needed to do some adjustments still. They got
Mm.
some notes back. So we are all used to that, just kind of jumping in. Like, like for instance, I would turn a cut in, we're waiting for notes. Well, this other episode needs help, so I go jump on that episode for a few days to help out. And then I get the notes back on my episode and I switch back to my episode and work on that. So it's just a lot of traffic management.
No, and flexibility as well.
Yeah.
That's important.
And it is a team effort. So it's just yeah, it's like working in episodic television is just it's a different rhythm for sure.
Oh, I'd had no idea.
Mhm.
I'm sorry, I had no idea. I was like, oh, you just do one episode and you do alone, or, and then, but that you really like character-wise, like you look at the characters and one of you has this one and the other one, and then you're like switching to episodes. Wow. My mind is going like, boom, okay, got it. New world opening. I had no idea.
So now trying to imagine doing that cutting on film, and you can't.
Mm, mm,
I mean, the technology enables us to work this way, which is really nice.
okay. So, so let's go to your films.
All right.
Yeah. Because you, as you said, you're working as editor to finance your projects, which I love. I mean, that is a dream come true for everyone in the film industry to be able to do that, to be able to work in the industry, and that is financing your own films. I think it's pretty cool. Tell us about that, and tell us about what are you working on now. Yeah, I'd love to hear that story.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not quite like John Cassavetes, who was taking acting jobs to pay for his movies, but it's similar. I mean, I was taking editing jobs, and that became my livelihood.
Mm,
You know, what became this like strange adventure to Los Angeles to pick up a few job skills became my livelihood. And especially after The Devil and Daniel Johnston, I just pretty much became a full-time documentary editor.
mm,
And I've always maintained a bit of a personal art practice on the side, either making experimental films or making photography. And and yeah, it's like this job sort of paid for that somewhat, but it also became pretty much my prime focus for a long time. Like I got married, I bought a house, I had a kid, and so now it's like this this career has become a career.
mhm.
But I always kept maintaining, this practice of working on very small scale stuff until I was finally, for years I'd been sort of chipping away at this long form documentary about this artist, Tony Conrad. And in 2010, I realized it was actually after my mother died that I realized like it's time to do this for real. So I circled back with Tony and I just said, "How do you feel about this?" And I've been filming you for years in performance and doing little gags and little man on the street stuff. And he was okay with it. So it was in 2010 I decided to go out and really start shooting this film for real. I'd been documenting, like I mentioned, his performances for years, and I had actually prepared a series of short films about Tony Conrad that were supposed to be released on a DVD. There was going to be a deluxe like CD, DVD, gatefold thing, really cool. And the idea with these short films is they could be played in any order.
Cool.
Um, Yeah, it was like a shuffle play kind of a thing. And then it never went to the manufacturing. It kind of got right up to the edge, and then they decided it was going to be either too expensive or too impractical, or for some reason it didn't get made. So all that material reverted back to me, and so I just started thinking about how I could repurpose that into into a feature film and shoot more material to supplement it. And I ended up shooting a lot more material to supplement it, and my archival material that I thought would, really be most of the movie ended up getting a lot smaller and smaller as I started shooting more and more new material. But, by the time I had finished, it had been 22 years since I started filming him.
22 years.
I mean, it had only been
Wow.
6 years since I decided to make a documentary, but it had been 22 years since I'd been filming him. So one thing I joked about was that my own footage was now the archival material.
Mm.
Um, and that was something that I I self-financed that film and edited it myself and produced a lot of it myself until I needed help with that. And some other producers got on board and helped me out. And I did, I had a little, there were times when I needed to start hiring outside people to help me
Mm-hmm.
because it was getting to be too much for me to do by myself. And that's great. I got to work with some amazing people and made some incredible friends for life in that process. So, but I edited that whole film myself, just for
Alone?
yeah.
Okay, may I ask you, because I obviously have no idea, you guys, as you can, this is obvious now. How many hours are we talking about?
I mean, it's not as much as you would think because a lot of the hours of the footage are like performances,
Mm.
right? Okay, so he did a 70-minute performance here or a 90-minute performance there. Well, I'm using maybe a minute of that stuff.
Mm.
So it's, and I think also because I had so many years of editing experience, I'm not an overshooter.
Mm.
I sort of know when we got it, or if we're not getting it, let's cut camera, like, yeah, I can, like, there's like, you have to go out and gather, and sometimes you just take chances and stuff isn't great. But I remember, I think one of the very first days we shot in New York, on the streets of New York, like, there were three whole scenes from that first day of shooting that made it to the final film, and that I knew that they would. They were just like, we just, it's like, if you're paying attention to what you're doing, when you're getting gold.
Hmm.
When he's like, yeah, it's like that's an A+ scene. Okay, that's an A+ scene. That's great right there. And then sometimes you're digging around, you're not sure you're getting it. But I mean, we got so much on those first couple of days, or first one day. So much got in from the first day of shooting, just in the streets of Brooklyn. There was a lot, I guess there was just a lot that needed to come out. This is a lot
Hmm.
that had to come out.
Do you, because I've had, when I've been on set and I've been working with those that are editors and are also directors, and it's exactly what you're talking about. They kind of know exactly where it can, like, where it fits and what you can use and all of that. Did you know before kind of the scenes you needed and what you wanted? Was that clear from the beginning on?
Well, I said I had a sense of his sort of biography, and I had a sense of the chronology of the work. So there was that. And I would ask him, there were several interviews, and I asked him, about certain works, and we conducted many interviews that you see through the film.
Mm.
Um, and of course, the thing that was crazy is sometimes during an interview, he would open a door to a whole new body of work that I hadn't even heard of or didn't know about. And one of the things that was very challenging about making this film about that artist is that, as amazing as he was conceptually, as an artist, he really did not care about
Mm.
legacy very much, and he did not care about preservation very much. And I had no I was being my own detective, trying to figure out how to tie all these works together. So much so that after he died, and there was a large museum retrospective with a catalog, they kept emailing me like, "Where did you get?" Like, so my research was helping a lot of people there, and there was a network of people that had kind of done a little chunk of research here or a chunk of research there. And I was trying to find all these people and tie all these disparate pieces together. It seems easy now. Like I said, the film is out and his work is sort of known, and the internet really blasted a lot of his work out there. I mean, he's still an esoteric character. I mean, not a household name. Um, but there's something legible out there about his career trajectory. But when I was making the film, there was nothing available that was legible outside of a few little articles or some friends who had gone to visit him, or someone had documented this thing 10 years ago. And, so it was like piecing all this stuff together was, I think, the most difficult part of that is I didn't have a very clear roadmap of what was there because there was every time I peeled back some layer, there was some whole other layer that he'd forgot to
Hmm.
mention. And sometimes I think about when I see these other artist documentaries, it's like, oh, you had four catalogs and two textbooks that were published before you made a film about this person. That's so much easier. There was one book that was sort of an academic book about his work that I used, but it was not complete, you know,
Mm.
um, at least in terms of what I was trying to do. And so it was like I tried to would hang on to some of these signposts as best I could and fill in a lot of the gaps. But that was the challenge of having to edit that was also like, how do I get all of this disparate work from this person who's sort of functioning on multiple levels?
Hmm.
How do I make it all stick together and seem like it's one artist? And so in structuring that film, I had to sort of make a case for why you should pay attention to this artist
Mm.
Hmm.
because he wasn't known, so I couldn't bank on any knowability. Like I had to start from scratch. Like you don't know who this person is, and but this is why you should.
Hmm.
Like this is why this work matters. And so maybe the film's a little didactic in that sense, but I think it had to be given the circumstances.
Well, this is obviously a huge experience, and yeah, and you kind of went for it, and you've succeeded, and now you're also teaching. And I can only like, imagine how is it to be your student and how lucky they are to have you.
Yes.
But what I want to ask you is what teaching editing taught you, what it gave you, maybe some fresh outlook into the whole process, mm, what it means for you teaching
Well,
people who are
it's
passionate about it.
it's only something I've started this year, just because the
Okay.
economics of the film industry have changed, and this was the work that was available, so I'm doing it. Um, yeah, it's funny. I can certainly tell stories from the trenches of what we did on this film or what we did on that film, and I can show work, and the
Hmm.
students certainly like seeing work from the films and shows that I've done. And there's another part of me that when the Avid isn't working or something isn't loading, or something isn't there, that I'm having these like little PTSD flashbacks of remembering what it was like when, the Avid is not working. The Avid is not working. The Avid. And this is sort of ridiculous, but like back in the 90s, like before the internet, there was just a 1-800 number that you could call for tech support. And there were so many times after midnight that we'd be on hold with this tech support number. It was a 24-hour support line, and we were definitely using it 24 hours.
Wow.
Like having to get tech support at 2 a.m. over the telephone, you know, like so I get little PTSD moments like that when the Avid's not working. But sometimes when I'm showing examples of things, it does get me excited about the process. And I can see that they're excited about the process. And I think the other thing, like I mentioned earlier, in just figuring out that my students already have in it. Like I have one student this semester who's never edited anything. Only one student. Everyone else is like they know Premiere or they've even worked professionally in Premiere, but they've never used Avid. So they're taking this course to learn Avid. So it's a little bit of a technical course. That's part of the requirement. So I try to inject whatever philosophy and theory I can into it. And sometimes I'll go off the rails
Mhm.
on some kind of a lecture, or just tell stories, or just get people thinking about something, or we'll just, like I said, I'll show them an episode of a show that I've done and then open it up to questions and they can ask me anything.
Mm.
And usually like one question begets several answers. So, they just, once you wind me up, I just get going and I can, talk about everything. You might be experiencing that now.
I love it.
We're loving it. We're loving it.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Good. You have to feed the content beast.
Mm, that's beautiful. Um, I don't know, in terms of teaching itself, do you feel like you have students in the room that are naturally talented, or do you think it's like, for me, it's a very interesting question. Like sometimes you get the person who just gets it, and it's not about the experience, but it's something that is, I don't know, it's they have like something in them that do you see those students, or is everyone is kind of equal to you?
Oh no,
I'm wondering, as a former student.
no, I've certainly, you can see there's some people who have some really interesting ideas that they're working with and it comes through. And there's some people who just do the basic work and that's fine, but then there are others you can see. And it's interesting because I think there's some part of film language that is not intellectual and is
Mhm.
something that is intuitive and felt.
Mm.
I mean, we can get into a lot of theory, and I can certainly talk about a lot of theory. Um, but sometimes I see people who are making like the most interesting intuitive choices, and they might not even know why they're making that choice. It just felt right. And I think that that's kind of where we're getting with this visual language. It's really interesting, is that the tools are there that they can start begin to work intuitively. We're not sitting there in a classroom teaching all this theory and then cutting everybody loose to follow out the theory and follow out the rules because the software is available to anybody.
Mm.
You can just start playing around with it and finding rhythms and languages that are really interesting. So sometimes that can't be taught. Something I'm pretty strict about teaching is really good work practices, like how to organize things and your workflow and how to just keep your work really organized. Because I think if you don't keep the work organized, the work suffers, right? It's sort of like
Mm.
keep it tidy, keep it clean, keep it organized, and keep it consistent
Mm.
when you're working. Like I've come in and seen people who have dialogue on the music tracks and music on the dialogue tracks, and they're mixing and matching all these different file types, and and it's just like a complete soup of insanity. And so I try to explain to them why we don't do it that way.
Oh, yeah, it's a disaster once you start doing that if you're working on a project which is longer than 2 seconds.
Yeah, and just like really good
2 seconds.
organizational skills about even how you name things and how you name your folders
Exactly.
and all this. So I'm a little bit strict about that kind of stuff, but I think style is wide open. But I always had this feeling like when I'm working, I try to be very, very organized because I always feel like if I'm the pilot of the plane and I have a heart attack, someone needs to take over and fly the plane.
Hmm.
Mm.
And it needs to be really clear what I've been doing or what's the most recent. I took over a film once where the first crew was let go and the producers brought me in to do a fix pass on this film. And I was digging around and trying to even find where was the last most recent cut of the film. And then I finally found it in a folder called Steve's Stuff. And I
That
was like,
makes
oh,
sense.
yeah, I was like, oh, buried in all these other folders, that's where the cut of the movie is. Ugh,
Sleep
so
stuff.
Steve stuff. That is, yeah, that makes sense.
so I'm very strict about that sort of thing. It's like that's not allowed. Like I want that folder at the top that says 00 underscore recent cut or something.
Which
You
makes
know,
sense.
Yeah, so I'm strict about that sort of stuff when I'm talking to people about organization. But I don't know. It's like the way that people are intuitively coming up with ideas is so interesting to me. So interesting. Um, why people are making the choices they're making. And it's getting to be like any art form that way.
Mm,
And that's really fun to see when I
mm.
see that. So I'm more about like keep your station clean and keep your tools tidy. But other than that, no rules.
Be free, be free.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Wow.
But you can't
This
really be free if your station's not tidy. I,
it's interesting you're saying that, Valeria and I were just talking about that today. That you kind of need to tidy around yourself to be, you
Oh,
know,
yeah,
more flexible
exactly. Yes.
and free in your head.
yeah,
That is
yeah.
true.
If your surroundings are a mess, I mean, look, there's some people who can really function that way. Like you look at the painter Francis Bacon's studio, and it's just like, it's very triggering for my OCD. But he managed to paint in there.
You did it. Wow. This has been amazing, Tyler. Thank you so, so much. I would just have a last question, and that would be, what is your next project?
The next project that I'm working on is as a film project,
Mhm.
is I am directing a documentary about the American artist Bruce Conner. And I
Mhm.
don't know
Okay.
if you're familiar with his work, but he was most active in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. He was sort of at the forefront of three consecutive countercultures and really was the first person to do like film mashups, found footage edits.
Mhm.
Um,
Okay.
he started in the 50s doing that. Yeah, and he was kind of, a pioneer in camera-less cinema using a lot of found footage, but then he also was making a lot of films with cameras. And all of these films that may seem old because they're 50 and 60 years old are still really radical and still really exciting to watch. At present, they are not super easy to find because the estate is very protective over having the films out. So they're really only viewable in gallery and museum context. They're not really online or anything like that.
Mhm.
That may change as a byproduct of making this film, that they might be more available. Um, but every now and then something pirates out and leaks up on YouTube. But if you're fast enough to catch it before it gets pulled down,
Why is that?
you
I'm
might be
just
able to see it.
curious. Why do they do that? Why do they not allow it to be online or
Because the films make money for the family. If
oh,
they
that's what you
are,
mean. Obviously. Okay, I got it.
yeah, if they are in a limited edition that can really only be seen in a museum or gallery context,
I understand.
it maintains the value of the work.
Mm-hmm.
It's why they've never agreed to putting anything out on a DVD or Blu-ray, or there's nothing
Mhm.
on the Criterion channel.
Mm.
And there's some people who've argued that there should be, but the model that the estate is using right now has been generating a lot of money for the family.
Which is
And
good.
the widow, Bruce Conner's widow is 93 now, and his son is 60,
Mm.
and so these works generate money. They are making new 4K editions of many
Mm-hmm.
of the films, and they sell right to museums and collectors, and they support the family. So that's been the real reason for doing that, is just to keep
Mm.
the value of the works up.
Mm.
Yeah.
You know what? I think that's
Uh,
beautiful. I think art is allowed exactly to do that. Art brings so much value, and the artists and their families are allowed to, monetize it. I think it's a good thing. I really do.
yeah, I think, and they do grant permissions for screening events.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, there's several Bruce Conner films they'll be showing at Anthology Film Archives, I think almost this week, with Tony Conrad. So Bruce Conner and Tony Conrad are paired together, which is funny for me since they're both the subjects of films I'm making.
Mhm.
Um,
Exciting.
so they
Wow.
do they do pop up in sort of official screenings.
Mhm.
You know, they will screen in New York and Los Angeles, and I think if an organization in any city wants to put on a film screening of Bruce Conner films, the estate does work with them to do that. They just don't want stuff online
Online.
and all
Yeah.
over
Very,
YouTube and
very smart
yeah,
about that thing.
yeah.
Smart.
So I mean, they're viewable if you go through the proper channels, you know.
So, and that's where your film will be, right?
Yeah,
You're
well, when
still
my yeah, well, my film when it's done will be more widely available and will offer a real window into Bruce's work.
more excited.
That's
Yeah,
beautiful.
yeah.
Thank you so
Thank you.
Well,
This
thank
has
you very
been-
much. I hope I gave you enough.
Oh my God, this is a journey into just
I feel like we're just getting started. I don't know.
I know, I know. This is to be continued.
This is part
Okay.
one.
Part
Okay.
one. Very much looking forward to your new film, and then we can have the part two, because as you could hear when I was like, you do what? So, well, with the editing, and you're like what? You're so like, how does that work? 3 of you at the same time? That is amazing. Like when you're working so intuitively, I think it's amazing. Well, thank you so much. This was such a pleasure.
Thank
As
you.
we're saying there, right? This is part one. There's
Absolutely.
definitely going to be a part two.
Well, you're welcome, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.